You know those friends you've known forever? The ones who've been there since grade school, who know all your secrets and dreams. For Sarah Lee Stern, those friends were Liam McAtasney and Preston Taylor. They called themselves the Squad. Just 3 kids from Neptune City, New Jersey, growing up together, sharing everything from photos to YouTube obsessions. But here's the thing about trust. Sometimes it's the perfect weapon. On December 2nd, 2016, something strange happened on the Route 35 Belmar Bridge. A silver Oldsmobile sat abandoned in the darkness, keys still in the ignition, no driver in sight. Pretty odd. Sure, but what made it really weird? The owner, 19-year-old Sarah, had seemingly vanished into thin air. Her dog was home alone, locked in his cage, something anyone who knew Sarah would tell you she'd never do. Her passport was still in her drawer, and get this, $25,000 in cash sat untouched in her bank vault. Speaking of strange, just a week before, on Thanksgiving, Liam had pitched what he called a movie idea to another friend. The plot? A detailed story about murdering a girl and throwing her body off a bridge. Quite the coincidence, right?
You didn't hear about it? It was all over the news.
Right, but I didn't know if you went through.
Yeah. And the worst part is, we threw her off the bridge, and the body never showed up.
It's probably frozen.
It's probably all the way out in the ocean.
And it's fucking frozen, so she's not coming up anytime soon. Her body's probably at the bottom of the fucking ocean, or she got eaten by a shark or some fucking shit.
Yeah.
Bro, this is like a fucking movie, bro.
Yeah.
But the strangest detail of all? When the truth finally came out, investigators discovered something chilling on Liam's phone. A timer. 19 minutes and 4 seconds. That's how long he spent watching his childhood friend take her last breath. Timing it like you might time a microwave dinner. This isn't just another true crime story. This is a story about how the deepest kind of trust can turn into the deadliest kind of betrayal. About how someone's closest friends became their worst nightmare. And about how a young artist who lived by the motto, practice reckless optimism, never saw the darkness hiding behind familiar smiles. Sarah Lee Stern's bright spirit first illuminated Neptune City, New Jersey, when she was born to Michael and Carla Stern in March 1997. As their only child, she grew into a young woman whose talents spanned both athletics and arts. At Neptune High School, she earned spots on the varsity softball and swim teams, but it was her passion for creative expression, drawing, painting, and digital media that truly defined her character. During these high school years, Sarah formed what seemed to be unbreakable bonds with 2 classmates who would become central figures in her story. Liam McAtasney had been her friend since grade school, sharing interests in video games and comic books. When Liam befriended Preston Taylor during freshman year, the 3 became inseparable, calling themselves the Squad. Their friendship appeared so genuine that Preston even took Sarah to junior prom. Life dealt Sarah a devastating blow in 2013 when her mother Carla passed away from cancer. Through this loss, Sarah found comfort in art and the emerging world of online content creation. She became an avid participant in the YouTube community, regularly attending conventions like VidCon and Comic-Con. Her motto, practice reckless optimism, carried her through these difficult times and became her signature approach to life. By 2016, Sarah was studying TV production and art at Brookdale Community College, pursuing her creative dreams with her father's full support. She maintained close ties with Liam and Preston, who lived just blocks away in a house owned by Liam's parents. To everyone who knew her, Sarah appeared to be on the cusp of a bright future, surrounded by trusted friends and armed with her characteristic optimism and creativity. Those who knew Sarah best described her as unapologetically herself, someone whose authentic nature drew others to her naturally. Her high school yearbook quote captured this perfectly. Be yourself from the beginning to the end of time. Don't ever be what you think other people would want you to be. Tragically, it would be her trust in those closest to her that would lead to her undoing, transforming a story of friendship and creativity into one of betrayal and loss. Life can change in an instant, often in ways we never expect. For Sarah Lee Stern, That moment came during a routine visit to her family's second home in Avon by the Sea, New Jersey. While there, she made a discovery that would unknowingly set in motion a chain of events leading to tragedy. A shoebox filled with cash, tucked away and forgotten until that fateful day. The money itself was unusual old bills, their edges brittle and worn with time. The currency showed its age not just in appearance but in condition, with many bills broken and fragile to the touch. This wasn't the kind of money you'd commonly see in circulation. It was the type that might raise eyebrows at a bank or store. The exact amount wasn't immediately clear, but it was substantial enough to make any young person's eyes widen thousands upon thousands of dollars. More money than Sarah had ever seen in one place. As Sarah would soon learn, this wasn't just found money. It was an inheritance, a final gift from her mother who had passed away 3 years earlier. The discovery carried an emotional weight beyond its monetary value. These worn bills represented her mother's careful planning, a way of providing for her daughter even after she was gone. It was a bittersweet revelation, bringing both joy at the unexpected gift and a fresh wave of grief for the mother who had hidden it away. Family members who knew about the money gave Sarah what seemed like sound advice at the time: keep it quiet. Don't tell anyone about it. It was the kind of counsel that comes from wisdom and experience, understanding how money can change people and complicate relationships. They knew that sudden wealth, even modest amounts, can bring out the worst in people, turning friends into opportunists and trust into vulnerability. But Sarah, with the natural trust of youth and faith in her closest friends, found it difficult to keep such a significant secret entirely to herself. She chose to confide in a select few people she believed she could trust completely. Among them was Liam McAtasney, her friend since grade school, someone who had been there through the loss of her mother and countless other life events. In Sarah's mind, sharing this information with Liam was as natural as sharing any other part of her life with a trusted friend. What Sarah didn't know, couldn't have known, was how this information would affect Liam. Behind his familiar face and years of friendship, something dark began to stir. Liam's reaction to the news would later prove chilling in hindsight. He began telling others about Sarah's discovery, but not with the discretion of a trusted confidant. Instead, he spoke about it in ways that should have raised red flags, describing it as the type of money someone would kill for, his exact words, though their sinister implications wouldn't become clear until it was too late. Taking precautions with her newfound wealth, Sarah decided to store the money in a safety deposit box at a local bank. It was a mature decision, showing she understood the need to protect her inheritance despite her openness about its existence with trusted friends. The safety deposit box became both a practical solution and, unknowingly, a key element in the timeline of events that would follow. The money's condition presented its own challenges. The worn, brittle nature of the bills meant they couldn't simply be deposited or spent without raising questions. This wasn't modern currency that could easily blend into everyday transactions. The aged bills required careful handling and consideration for how they might eventually be used. It was a detail that would later become significant in understanding the full scope of what happened to Sarah. As time passed, Sarah continued to visit the bank periodically, managing her inheritance while planning for her future. She had dreams of perhaps using some of the money to help fund her move to Canada, a plan she had been considering for some time. The money represented possibilities for education, for travel, for pursuing her creative dreams. She saw it as a stepping stone toward her goals, never imagining it would instead become a motive for unthinkable betrayal. The discovery of this money created ripples that spread far beyond Sarah's initial circle of trusted confidants. As Liam shared the information with others, the story of Sarah's inheritance began to circulate, though few knew the exact amount or details. Rumors and speculation grew, transforming the reality of worn, old bills into fantasies of easy wealth. While Sarah continued to treat the money with care and consideration, others, particularly Liam, began to view it with dangerous obsession. This hidden inheritance, meant to be a blessing from a mother to her daughter, instead became the catalyst for events that would ultimately lead to Sarah's disappearance. December 2nd, 2016, began like any other winter day in Neptune City, New Jersey. None of Sarah Lee Stern's friends, family, or neighbors could have known that by the end of this day, the 19-year-old would vanish, leaving behind a mystery that would shake their tight-knit community to its core. The morning hours passed routinely enough. It wasn't until around noon that the day's events began to unfold. Liam McAtasney, Sarah's longtime friend, called her to ask if she wanted to get something to eat. This wasn't unusual. Their friendship had always included casual hangouts and spontaneous plans. According to Liam's later account, they met up sometime between 1 o'clock and 2 p.m. Their first stop that afternoon was Taco Bell, a simple lunch between friends. Security footage would later confirm their presence there, with Sarah appearing to be in good spirits. She was smiling, chatting, showing no signs of distress or any indication that this day would be different from any other. After lunch, they had a specific errand to run, one that would later prove crucial to understanding the events that followed. That errand was a visit to the Draper's house, Sarah's neighbors. She had texted them earlier about dropping off a bin containing some of her mother's belongings. The Drapers weren't home at the time, but they had told Sarah it was fine to leave the items. This detail, the bin of her mother's belongings, would later take on new significance as investigators tried to piece together Sarah's state of mind on that final day. The most critical stop of the day was at the bank. Sarah visited her safety deposit box, where she kept the inheritance money she had discovered months earlier. Bank surveillance footage captured her there, waving at the teller, still showing no signs of distress. She withdrew some money that day, though notably left behind $25,000. A detail that would later become significant in understanding what really happened to her. After the bank visit, Sarah and Liam returned to her house. According to Liam's initial statements to police, they spent time playing video games upstairs before he left for work around 4:45 p.m. This timeline seemed ordinary enough, but like many details from that day, it would eventually be revealed as part of a carefully constructed deception. The next concrete evidence of activity came in the early morning hours of December 3rd, at 2:46 a.m., when an Uber driver crossing the Route 35 Belmar Bridge made a troubling discovery. The driver, who wished to remain anonymous, called 911 to report an abandoned vehicle. His call revealed both concern and confusion.
911, where's the emergency?
Not emergency. Actually on the Belmar Bridge, right after heading south in the middle of the bridge, there's a car that's abandoned. It's off to the side of the road, but
The Belmar Bridge being the 35 bridge?
yeah, the 35 bridge would be going from north going south
Into Belmar.
into Belmar. Yeah.
Right. Hey, did you pass the midpoint? Because up to the midpoint is Neptune, and after the midpoint is Belmar.
So yeah, Neptune actually. Technically, it was after. It looked like it was more on the Neptune side.
So what kind of car is it?
Kind of looks like an old beat up, light tan colored like sedan.
And what was your name, sir?
So if it's okay, I'd just rather be anonymous.
And this is your cell number?
Yeah, I'm driving Uber and Lyft tonight, so I just figured I'd give a call. It's kind of hard to see, I think, if you're coming the other way.
And was there anybody inside the vehicle?
I looked, no.
Okay.
Unless they were sleeping. I couldn't see them by their head being up. Nobody
Okay.
looked like they were in it.
All right.
At 2:52 a.m., an officer arrived at the scene to find a silver 1994 Oldsmobile sedan abandoned on the bridge. What immediately caught the officer's attention was that the keys were still in the ignition. There had been no accident, no sign of damage to the vehicle, but something felt wrong. The officer conducted an initial search of the area, looking for any signs this might have been a suicide attempt, but found no body or personal belongings nearby. The vehicle was quickly identified as being registered to Lillian Stern, Sarah's grandmother, though it was known to be the car Sarah regularly drove. This discovery set in motion a series of events that would soon involve multiple law enforcement agencies and the entire community in a desperate search for answers. Sarah's father, Michael, who was in Florida at the time, received the kind of phone call every parent dreads. When officers asked if he knew why Sarah's car might have been abandoned on the bridge, he instantly knew something was terribly wrong. Without hesitation, he began the long drive back to New Jersey, desperately trying to reach his daughter by phone throughout the journey. Back in Neptune City, two officers went to the Stern residence. finding the front door unlocked after repeated knocks went unanswered. Inside, they found an empty house with only one sign of life: Sarah's beloved dog, Buddy, left alone in his cage. For those who knew Sarah, this detail was immediately alarming. She adored her dog and would never have willingly left him confined without care. The final hours of December 2nd and the early morning of December 3rd would be scrutinized countless times in the months to come. Every detail, from the bank visit to the abandoned car, from Sarah's last known movements to the dog left alone, would be examined and re-examined as investigators tried to understand what had happened to the young woman who seemingly vanished into thin air on that cold winter night. The events of December 2nd, pieced together through security footage, witness statements, and later revelations, would tell a story far more sinister than anyone could have imagined on that first night. In this first interview, Liam laid out what seemed to be a plausible timeline of December 2nd. He described getting food with Sarah, helping her drop off belongings at the Draper's house, and spending time at her home before leaving for work around 4:45 p.m. He claimed to have lost his cell phone that day, a detail that would later take on new significance. Throughout the interview, he maintained a concerned demeanor while subtly suggesting that Sarah might have chosen to disappear. The investigation soon brought them to Preston Taylor, Liam's roommate and another close friend of Sarah's. Unlike Liam's seemingly open cooperation, Preston's initial interview was marked by an apparent attempt to distance himself from Sarah. He referred to her as a mutual friend rather than acknowledging their years of close friendship, including their history of attending prom together. This subtle shift in relationship description caught the attention of experienced investigators. As the investigation progressed, officers learned about the money Sarah had discovered months earlier. The surveillance footage from the bank on December 2nd showed Sarah making what would be her final visit to her safety deposit box. The discovery that she had left behind $25,000 raised immediate questions. If she had planned to run away, as Liam suggested, why would she leave such a significant sum behind? This detail didn't align with the theory of a planned disappearance. The neighbor who had last seen Sarah, Mrs. Draper, provided investigators with potentially concerning information about Sarah's mental state. She mentioned that Sarah might have been depressed, a detail that investigators had to consider carefully. However, unlike many similar cases where law enforcement might fixate on a single theory, the investigators here maintained a broader view, refusing to lock themselves into any one explanation for Sarah's disappearance. The search efforts continued to expand, with the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office and New Jersey State Police joining forces with the U.S. Coast Guard and local law enforcement agencies. The scale of the response reflected both the mysterious nature of Sarah's disappearance and the community's determination to find answers. Each day brought new searches, new interviews, and new attempts to piece together what had happened on that December night. Throughout these initial searches, both Liam and Preston participated in the community efforts, even giving interviews to local media about their concern for their friend. They joined search parties, expressed worry about Sarah's whereabouts, and helped rally others to join the search effort. Their participation, which initially appeared to demonstrate friendship and concern, would later be revealed as part of an elaborate deception. On December 6th, Liam agreed to another interview at the police station. During this conversation, he expanded on his earlier statements, adding more details about Sarah's supposed desire to escape to Canada and her allegedly troubled relationship with her father. He continued to build a narrative that painted Sarah as depressed and eager to leave her life behind, while portraying himself as a concerned friend who just wanted to help find her. The initial phase of the investigation revealed the challenges of pursuing a missing person case where the evidence was largely circumstantial. Investigators had to balance multiple theories. Had Sarah taken her own life? Had she chosen to disappear? Or had something more sinister occurred? The discovery of her abandoned car with keys still in the ignition, coupled with her beloved dog left alone, suggested something beyond a simple disappearance, but proving what had actually happened would require more evidence than was initially available. These early days of the investigation laid the groundwork for what would eventually become a much darker revelation. While investigators carefully gathered evidence and conducted interviews, they were unknowingly building a case that would ultimately expose how friendship could be corrupted by greed, and how trust could be weaponized with deadly consequences. 7 weeks after Sarah's disappearance, in January 2017, the investigation took a dramatic turn when Anthony Curry, a former classmate of Sarah's, came forward with information that would crack the case wide open. His revelation would transform what appeared to be a mysterious disappearance into something far more sinister, exposing a calculated plot that had been months in the making. Anthony had become friends with Liam McAtasney during their junior year of high school, bonding over their shared interest in filmmaking. As an aspiring film director, Anthony often worked on various projects, and Liam would sometimes participate in these creative endeavors. But it was a conversation that took place on Thanksgiving Day 2016, just a week before Sarah's disappearance, that would later prove crucial to solving the case. On that Thanksgiving Day, Liam approached Anthony with what he called an idea for a movie plot. The premise he described was chilling. A story about killing a girl by strangling her and then throwing her body off a bridge with the help of a friend. Anthony's reaction at the time was one of discomfort and confusion. He had no interest in pursuing such a dark and disturbing concept, and the conversation left him feeling uneasy. However, in the immediate aftermath, he dismissed it as perhaps nothing more than Liam's twisted imagination. It wasn't until news of Sarah's disappearance began to spread that the significance of that Thanksgiving conversation started to dawn on Anthony. The connection between Liam's movie plot and the real-life disappearance of Sarah took several weeks to fully register in his mind. When it finally clicked, he realized the horrifying possibility that what Liam had presented as a fictional story might have been something far more sinister, a preview of his actual intentions. Adding to Anthony's growing concerns, Liam had begun sending him messages on Snapchat, casually asking if the police had contacted him yet. These messages carried an undertone of anxiety, suggesting Liam was worried about what Anthony might tell authorities. The combination of the Thanksgiving conversation and these subsequent messages convinced Anthony that he needed to come forward with what he knew. Demonstrating remarkable presence of mind, Anthony understood the ephemeral nature of Snapchat messages and their tendency to disappear after viewing. Rather than taking screenshots, which would have alerted Liam through Snapchat's notification system, Anthony cleverly used a separate digital camera to photograph his phone screen, preserving evidence of their exchanges without tipping off Liam. When Anthony brought this information to investigators, they recognized its potential significance immediately. His testimony about the Thanksgiving conversation and the subsequent messages provided a critical breakthrough in the case. But rather than moving immediately to arrest Liam, investigators saw an opportunity to gather more concrete evidence through a carefully planned sting operation. On January 31, 2017, Anthony agreed to participate in this operation, showing remarkable courage in confronting someone he now suspected of murder. The plan was carefully crafted. Anthony would reach out to Liam with a story about breaking his camera on a film set, supposedly dropping it in a bucket of fake blood. He would ask Liam for money to help replace it, setting up a reason for them to meet in person. The sting operation was fraught with risk. Anthony would be wearing a wire while meeting with someone who, if guilty, had already demonstrated a capacity for violence. The investigating detectives later admitted their concern for Anthony's safety during the operation, knowing they needed to stay close enough to intervene if necessary, while remaining far enough away to avoid detection. When Liam agreed to meet, what followed was one of the most chilling conversations ever recorded in a murder investigation. Upon meeting, Liam's first action was to pat Anthony down for a wire, a moment of intense anxiety for both Anthony and the nearby investigators. After satisfying himself that Anthony wasn't wearing a wire, though he had failed to find it, Liam began to talk. What emerged from that recorded conversation was a confession that shocked even hardened investigators.
You didn't hear about it? It was all over the news.
Right, but I didn't know if you went through.
Yeah. And the worst part is, we threw her off the bridge, and the body never showed up.
It's probably frozen.
It's probably all the way out in the ocean.
And it's fucking frozen, so she's not coming up anytime soon. Her body's probably at the bottom of the fucking ocean, or she got eaten by a shark or some fucking shit.
Yeah.
Bro, this is like a fucking movie, bro.
Yeah. And, dude. Alright, so, I'm hanging out with her. She has, we went to the bank, she took some money out, not all of her money. We're counting it out, and then she goes to walk out the front door. I choke her out, drag her. My biggest problem was the dog, and her dog laid there and watched as I killed her. Didn't do anything. Her fucking dog. What kind of dog? Yeah, what kind of dog is that? It's like some...
Was it a big dog?
It looks like a beagle, but it's like the size of a Great Dane.
Jeez. Nobody was there? Grandmother was
No,
there?
nobody was there. Even her dad wasn't there. He was in Florida.
Yeah, you said that. He was
Liam described, with disturbing casualness, how he had planned Sarah's murder for 6 months. He spoke about timing her death with his phone, about watching her dog's reaction as he strangled her, and about enlisting Preston's help to dispose of her body. The level of detail and the emotionless way he recounted these events revealed a coldness that was almost beyond comprehension. Perhaps most disturbing was Liam's discussion of the money. His disappointment at finding only $10,000 instead of the larger sum he had expected, and his frustration that the old bills might be too suspicious to use. He showed no remorse, no guilt, only annoyance at the practical inconveniences he had encountered in committing murder. "I don't feel any different," he told Anthony. "I don't think about it." This recorded confession provided investigators with exactly what they needed. Not just proof of Liam's guilt, but also evidence of premeditation and the involvement of Preston Taylor. The breakthrough that began with Anthony's memory of a disturbing Thanksgiving conversation had led to the unraveling of the entire murderous plot, revealing how a supposed friendship had been corrupted by greed into something unimaginably dark. Anthony's courage in coming forward and participating in the sting operation, despite the personal risk involved, proved to be the key that unlocked the entire case. His actions would ultimately bring justice for Sarah and provide her family with the answers they so desperately sought, though the truth would prove far more horrifying than anyone had initially imagined. On February 1st, 2017, the day after Liam McAtasney's recorded confession, investigators made their first arrest, but not of Liam. In a strategic decision, they moved to arrest Preston Taylor first, understanding that the pressure of arrest might compel him to cooperate. This tactical choice would prove crucial to building their case, as Preston's reaction exceeded even their expectations. Preston's facade of loyalty to Liam crumbled almost immediately upon his arrest. The young man who had once been part of the squad with Sarah, who had taken her to junior prom, began to reveal the full scope of their horrific plot. His confession painted a picture of premeditation that stretched back months before Sarah's murder, though he claimed the original plan had been merely to rob her of the inherited money. According to Preston's confession, he had known about Liam's intentions for months. The evolution from robbery to murder had been Liam's decision, though Preston did nothing to prevent it. The plan had become increasingly detailed, with the two even considering various methods of killing Sarah before settling on strangulation, believing it would leave the least evidence. They had calculated that making it appear as a suicide would be their best cover. The details Preston provided were precise and damning. He described receiving a Snapchat message from Liam on December 2nd, indicating that he and Sarah were heading to the bank. Preston understood this as the signal that their plan was being put into motion. After Liam murdered Sarah and left for work, Preston's role began. He went to Sarah's house, moved her body from the bathroom to the backyard, concealing it next to a bush under leaves, while he searched unsuccessfully for Liam's lost phone. Preston's confession continued with the events that followed Liam's return from work. Together, they moved Sarah's body from the backyard into the passenger seat of her own car. During this time, they also stole the safe from her house, placing it in Preston's vehicle. The attention to detail in their plan extended to the security camera across the street from Sarah's house. Liam had studied how Sarah typically backed out of her driveway and mimicked her movements precisely to avoid suspicion. Perhaps most crucial to the investigation, Preston revealed the locations where they had hidden the money. They had buried Sarah's safe in Shark River Park, but had moved the approximately $10,000 in cash to a different safe, which they buried near the lighthouse at Sandy Hook. This information would prove invaluable to investigators in recovering physical evidence. Preston's cooperation didn't stop with his confession. He agreed to participate in a detailed reenactment of their actions, returning to Sarah's house with investigators to demonstrate exactly how they had moved her body. The clinical way he described their actions showing no emotion as he detailed their movements, was deeply disturbing to the experienced investigators present. He also took them to the Belmar Bridge, explaining how they had worked together to lift Sarah's body over the railing. Armed with Preston's confession and the evidence he provided, investigators moved to arrest Liam McAtasney. The physical evidence they discovered corroborated Preston's account in crucial ways. When they recovered the buried lockbox containing Sarah's money, they found it was a Century safe box with the number 002. In a damning piece of evidence, when Liam was arrested, they found on his keychain a key for a Century safe lockbox, also numbered 002. The investigation also uncovered digital evidence that supported their case. While security cameras on the bridge itself weren't functioning, a frustratingly common occurrence in such cases, a camera on Sarah's neighbor's house provided crucial corroboration of Preston's timeline. Though the footage was dark, it captured headlights approaching Sarah's house from the back and a figure moving toward the rear of the home at the times Preston had described. Liam's arrest marked the end of his facade as a concerned friend. Unlike his previous willingness to speak with investigators, he immediately lawyered up, refusing to answer any questions. However, the evidence against him was overwhelming. The recorded confession to Anthony Curry, Preston's detailed testimony, the physical evidence of the safe key, and the supporting security footage all combined to create a compelling case. The arrests brought to light the full scope of the betrayal Sarah had suffered. Two young men she had trusted, one a childhood friend and the other a former prom date, had plotted her death for months. They had participated in searches for her, given interviews expressing concern for her welfare, and played the role of grieving friends while knowing exactly what had happened to her. The calculated nature of their actions, from the initial planning to the attempt to make her death appear as a suicide, revealed a level of premeditation that shocked the community. As news of the arrest spread, the community that had spent weeks searching for Sarah had to grapple with the horrifying truth. The very people who had walked alongside them in searches, who had appeared on local media pleading for information about Sarah's whereabouts, had been responsible for her death all along. The betrayal extended beyond Sarah to encompass the entire community that had invested their hearts and efforts in finding her. The trial of Liam McAtasney began on January 23, 2019, in a courtroom thick with tension and anticipation. For Sarah's father, Michael, and the entire community that had been shaken by her murder, this represented the final step in their long journey toward justice. What unfolded in that courtroom would reveal not only the full scope of the crime, but also one of the most bizarre defense strategies ever presented in a murder case. The defense team's primary strategy was so extraordinary it bordered on the absurd. They claimed that Liam's recorded confession to Anthony Curry was not actually a confession at all, but rather an audition tape for a movie. This assertion, that the detailed and chilling description of Sarah's murder was merely a performance, strained credibility to its breaking point. The idea that someone would describe killing their friend, complete with precise details about timing her death and watching her dog's reaction, as part of an acting exercise seemed beyond comprehension. Without Sarah's body ever being recovered, the defense attempted to exploit this absence of physical evidence. They suggested that Preston Taylor, who had already admitted his role in the crime, could have been the actual killer since Liam was at work during part of the evening in question. This strategy ignored the overwhelming evidence of Liam's recorded confession and the numerous details that only the killer could have known. The defense's final attempt to create reasonable doubt came through a witness named Craig Hetzel, who testified that he had seen Sarah walking alone down the street around 5 a.m. on December 3rd. However, this testimony quickly unraveled under scrutiny. Hetzel claimed to have seen Sarah's abandoned car on the Belmar Bridge at the same time, yet records clearly showed the car had been towed hours earlier. Despite these inconsistencies, Hetzel remained adamant about his sighting, even suggesting that Sarah might still be alive somewhere. The prosecution's case, in contrast, was methodical and devastating. They presented evidence that showed Liam had deliberately and carefully planned Sarah's murder for months, with the sole purpose of stealing what he believed would be between $50,000 and $100,000. They detailed how he had manipulated investigators by feeding them false information about Sarah's mental health and her relationship with her father, all while participating in searches for her body. Preston Taylor's testimony proved crucial to the prosecution's case. Now cooperating fully as part of his plea deal, Preston took the stand and walked the jury through the explicit details of their plan. He described their months of plotting, including conducting a dry run to determine how long the entire process would take. His testimony revealed how they had used Sarah's known desire to move to Canada as part of their plot, convincing her to withdraw money from the bank under the guise of planning her trip. The most powerful moment of the trial came when the prosecution played the recording of Liam's confession to Anthony Curry. Michael Stern, forced to listen to the detailed description of his daughter's murder, broke down in the courtroom. The recording revealed not just the facts of the crime but the chilling casualness with which Liam discussed ending Sarah's life. His complaints about getting less money than expected and his statement that he felt no different after the murder provided a window into a mind seemingly devoid of empathy or remorse. The prosecution also presented evidence that directly linked Liam to Sarah's stolen money. The Century Safebox key found on his keychain matched perfectly with the recovered lockbox containing the stolen cash, providing a physical connection between Liam and the proceeds of his crime. This evidence helped establish not just his guilt but also his motive. Expert testimony played a crucial role in explaining why Sarah's body had never been found. An ocean engineering expert testified about the tide and current conditions on the night of December 2nd, explaining that within 24 hours of entering the water, a body would likely have been pulled 7 miles offshore. This testimony helped the jury understand why the absence of Sarah's body did not diminish the strength of the case against Liam. Michael Stern's testimony proved particularly moving as he spoke about his relationship with his daughter, definitively countering the false narrative Liam had created about their supposedly troubled relationship. Michael described their last text exchange, where Sarah had commented on how pretty Disney World's castle looked with its lights, hardly the communication of someone desperate to escape her father, as Liam had claimed. The trial also revealed the full extent of how Liam and Preston had manipulated the community's trust. They had not only participated in searches but had given interviews to local media, expressing concern for Sarah while knowing exactly what had happened to her. This betrayal extended beyond Sarah to encompass the entire community that had invested time and emotional energy in searching for her. Throughout the trial, Liam maintained the same emotionless demeanor he had shown in his recorded confession. He showed no reaction to the devastating testimony against him, no remorse as Sarah's father broke down in tears, no sign that he recognized the gravity of what he had done. This cold demeanor seemed to confirm the portrait painted by his recorded confession of someone who could commit murder and feel no different. The prosecution's case painted a clear picture of a calculated murder motivated by simple greed. They showed how Liam had weaponized his lengthy friendship with Sarah, using her trust to execute a plan he had developed over months. The evidence demonstrated not just that Liam had killed Sarah, but that he had done so with a level of premeditation and calculation that spoke to the darkness of his character. On February 26, 2019, after weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury reached their verdict. Liam McAtasney was found guilty on all charges, including murder, felony murder, robbery, desecration of human remains, conspiracy to desecrate human remains, tampering with evidence, and hindering apprehension. For months later, he received his sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 10 years for the other charges. Preston Taylor, who had taken a plea deal in exchange for his testimony against Liam, received a sentence of 18 years in prison plus a $10,000 fine. His cooperation with investigators, while crucial to securing justice for Sarah, did not erase his role in her death. He will be eligible for parole in May of 2032, though no amount of time served can truly compensate for his part in betraying and disposing of his friend's body. For Michael Stern, the verdicts and sentences brought a complex mix of emotions. While satisfied that justice had been served, he openly expressed his wish that New Jersey still had the death penalty, which had been abolished in 2007. As he poignantly stated, no verdict could bring his daughter back, and no sentence could fully heal the wound left by her loss. The pain of knowing how she died, at the hands of someone she had trusted since childhood, continues to haunt him. In a move that demonstrated their continued lack of remorse, both Liam and Preston attempted to appeal their convictions. These appeals were denied, affirming the justice of their original sentences. Even after conviction, Liam's mother continued to proclaim her son's innocence, despite the overwhelming evidence against him, including his own recorded confession. Her tears during interviews seemed to lack the substance of true grief, especially when compared to the profound sorrow of Sarah's family and true friends. While Sarah's body has never been recovered, the community has found ways to honor her memory. A section of the Belmar Bridge, where she took her final journey, has been decorated as a memorial to her life. In July 2017, over 1,000 people gathered at the local community center for a celebration of Sarah's life. The event focused not on the tragedy of her death, but on the joy and creativity she brought to her 19 years of life. During the celebration, teachers, friends, and community members shared stories about Sarah, painting a picture of a young woman who was, in their words, unapologetically herself. They spoke of her artistic talents, her kindness, her quirky sense of humor, and her ability to make others feel accepted and valued. The phrased practice reckless optimism, which Sarah had loved so much in life, took on new meaning as her community chose to celebrate her spirit rather than dwell on the darkness of her death.